Week 8 of the college football season is here. And while Coach and I missed last week, we've got a lot to get into. So let's get after it, fam. This is College Kickoff Eve. What is up, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of College Kickoff Eve. We did miss last week. The coach is back. The Iceman is back. And we want to welcome you back to the feed after what has been a raucous last 2 weeks of college football. So, Coach, how you doing, bud?
Iceman, doing great, man. Glad to be back at it. Yeah, it's been a rocky couple weeks, it's just our thing, right? Life kind of happens, but we've always said we are a family first podcast, and so we take care of things when they pop up, and we're here though and ready and excited to talk a little college football.
I'd say so. I mean, the family stuff is going to come up from time to time, even if we were doing this for a paid gig, not to peel back the curtain for those of you at home who think that we do this for a living. But it's going to happen sometimes. And I was up in Connecticut with James, visiting some family. We came back. My wife was sick. Things happen. And so sometimes we have to pivot. We did want to do a show on Saturday morning, but again, sometimes just things are going to happen. I said it was overcome by events, and I think that that's perfectly acceptable to say.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And but the reason we're here is to talk a little college ball, and we do it because we really enjoy it, right? It's not a this isn't a job for us. It's a labor of love, right?
I would agree. Want to welcome everybody to the feed tonight. So if you are new to the proceedings here, we want to welcome you for the first time. But those of you like Jonah who just said, let's go, you're coming back here. We want to welcome everybody back. So, of course, every single week we like to do a call for schools around here. It's very, very important that we do so because, hey, this is a college football show. So we want to be able to have everybody representing their own school. So
Need to get a couple more people on here, man.
we
I know there's
definitely
a
need
few
to.
people watching. Just throw out the team you're a fan of, just
Yes,
throw it in the chat. Tell
agreed.
us who your team is. We'll slap it up there. Just
Yeah,
trying to see how many we can get before the season's out.
it'd be great if we could get all 300 and something, wouldn't it?
That'd be
Or
wild, man.
however many there are. Yeah, that would be wild. It would mean that we have made it to some level of fame or, I guess, notoriety that we probably aren't deserving of. But as Brad said, throughout the course of the show, throughout the course of this particular feed, or actually any week, throw up your school that you are either a fan of, you went to, whatever it is, because we want to make sure that we represent all the schools that are here. So I think we should start the show this week with probably what is the biggest story out of college football, and that is what is emerging now as a breaking story about Michigan. And I think they're calling it sign stealing. I think that's what they're calling it. I don't have a lot of information on this in terms of everything that's gone down. I did see today that somebody did get fired. I think it was like some staffer got fired, but the gist of what I understand it, and anybody who's in the feed, and Brad, you can also tell me if I have some of these details wrong, but it sounds like Michigan was sending folks, staffers, to games that were happening across the country of teams that they felt could be potential playoff competitors, I think, or playoff opponents or something like that, to get an idea of what they were doing and to also look at the kind of signage that they were using to indicate the plays. And I think that we've seen some of these stories before, and I think winning in the margins is always going to happen in sports. Teams are always going to try to find a way to shift the competitive balance their way. But that's all that I know right now, and I think that's all that we know in general, right?
Yeah, for the most part. Yeah, so it's being portrayed as sign stealing, which is what is happening to some degree, among other things. But the big thing is the rule says you cannot send any member of your staff or your program to scout other games in person or to scout any opponents on your schedule that season in person. And apparently there's speculation that they have violated that. One way out of it, I think it's a dumb rule. Let me say that, and we'll get back to that in a minute. But one way out of it, if the only people they have been scouting in person are potential playoff opponents that they don't play on their schedule this year, they've done nothing wrong um, at that point in time. But some of the things that we have seen have indicated otherwise. There was a very interesting interview that maybe makes a little bit more sense now that happened at halftime of the Rutgers Michigan game where Greg Schiano made some comments about there's some things happening that shouldn't be happening or something along those lines. And at the time, I think it was a confusing comment, but as the story is unfolded, it's like maybe he picked up on something like that. And there's people too that are saying, man, Michigan, they seem to struggle like out the gates against everybody, but after the first few series, it's like all of a sudden they turn it on and it's totally different. So again, there's a lot of teams that start slow, and so I don't know if that's a clear indicator, but I'll say this. I think this is the kind of crap that happens when you're, one of the top teams, one of the top dogs. People want to want to take their shots and find ways to, I guess, knock you down a notch or two. And this is because this stuff is happening across the country. I guarantee you, at every level of football, this is happening. When I coached, we would send people at times to go watch other games. When I was serving my 1 game suspension for getting kicked out of a sophomore football game, I had to miss. I couldn't go to any game that following week. The sophomore varsity for nothing. I couldn't be there at all. And so I went and watched a game of the opponent that we were playing the next week. You know what I mean? And so, yeah, you trade film and stuff like that, but there's stuff you can see in person. It doesn't show up on film. You can see if a team is they're no huddle, what kind of tempo do they use? How do they sub in different packages throughout the game? You can pick up on signs and stuff like that. But you can see body language in between plays and on the sideline, and kind of there's a lot you can take from viewing a game in person compared to when you watch film. And then there's a lot of gamesmanship that happens with film. Me and my dad were talking about it. He talked about the guy who coached at his high school back in the 70s. This was 8 millimeter film, and they would run like on their, like a lot of teams do now on their extra point. They would run one of those like polecat formations, and then if you don't cover it properly, they'll try to run for the 2 point conversion. But if you cover it properly, then they come in and kick the extra point. Well, they were doing that back in the 70s, and he tried to cut it out of the film, and like literally cut it out of the film, splice it together, and he missed what he wasn't very precise, and so you could catch part of it. And I encountered that when I was coaching. We would trade film, and by the time I got done coaching, we were trading it online. There was no physical DVDs or VHS or any of that stuff. And we'd go through as we were scouting the film, and I noticed stuff like that. Like as the clip was starting, you would see what looked like the guys running in from the side, because a lot of teams do that, running in from the side to come in and kick the PAT. And it's like, wait a minute, like they chopped that part out. Or like as you're charting down in distance, 1st and 10, 2nd and 3, whatever, and all of a sudden there's a down missing. And it's like, and they're 30 yards downfield. And it's like, what happened on that play?
You're like, what happened here? Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, everybody's trying to gain an edge any way that they can. Um, I I understand it's the rules. It's a stupid rule. Um, but that being said, it for the NCAA, as inept and incompetent as they are, it seems like they pick the most irrelevant things to use their power to enforce. It's absurd, and maybe these types of things are the only things they really have any power to enforce anymore. I'm not sure.
Is it that irrelevant when the dynasty of the last 20 years in the New England Patriots was caught doing something similar? Obviously, they were using film, but they were trying to do the same thing. And many people would say that it has tarnished their legacy. So I guess what I want to know is there going to be the same kind of energy if this is on level with that? Because I hear what you're saying. The NCAA are clowns. And already earlier this year, we had the Jim Harbaugh buying a hamburger on the wrong credit card thing. So that's ridiculous. But I can understand them being a little bit more, I don't want to say iron fisted because we don't know if that's what's going to happen, but I can understand the public perception being a little bit worse because the energy that people had for this when it happened with other teams, especially in the NFL, was pretty high. So I think that people do regard this as something different, and the Astros too in the MLB playoffs. I mean, it's again all falls under gamesmanship and trying to win in the margins. I personally think that that's what every team does all the time. It's just some of the teams get caught, some of them don't, and that's kind of what's happened here. But it does seem like the NCAA is trying to find things that are happening at Michigan, or they've been happening for a while, and now they're getting sloppy because they've been getting away with it. I don't know. That's just conjecture on my part.
Sure, and like you said, whether it once teams get caught, yeah, we can say, "Man, like, that's definitely cheating," but again, like, they're just the ones that got caught, okay? Like,
Yeah.
the Astros are just the ones that got caught. If you don't think other teams are doing other things to steal signs and communicate them to the batter, and it's been happening forever with runners on second base, and that seems to be accepted, uh, for the most part, and it's when you get electronics involved and everything else that people have an issue with it, and some of it's a byproduct of just the technology we have available, these days that is really open Pandora's box as far as the possibilities to cheat in different ways that are really creative, honestly. But everybody's trying to find an edge. If you get caught, you get caught, right? And then there's consequences in most cases. So I don't have like a moral issue with it. I'm like, this is shame on Jim Harbaugh, shame on Michigan, whatever. I mean, the only way the NCAA finds out about this stuff is if it gets reported to them. They're not actively policing it. So, why isn't anybody reporting on Indiana doing this? You know what I mean?
Because
Because
Indiana sucks. That's
exactly,
why.
and that's what it is, man. And look, how long has Alabama, some of the recruiting stuff that it seems like was coming up in the news for a long time, for years. Georgia recently, there's been controversies that all of a sudden become known that have probably been happening for years, and so once you're in the spotlight, once you're one of the top dogs, people are going to find any way they can to try to take you down. And I just think that's what's happening here.
Conspiracy theories all around. So we'll have to see what happens with this because, like I said, there hasn't really been much movement. This just broke. I think it was yesterday that it broke, and haven't seen a whole lot. I mean, Michigan, some people would say they haven't played anybody. And I guess in some ways you could say that that's a valid argument. But also, I think one of the things that happens, and let me know what you think about this. Every single year it comes up, people say, like, who scheduled this schedule? Well, many times these schedules are made so far in advance. Like, you and I can go look at who Michigan or who Virginia Tech is playing in like 2028, 2030. Like, they have these things scheduled out so far in advance. And the conference games then get doled out each particular year. And I don't know how much the teams or the universities have to do with that. I think it just sort of happens. So the big matchups, the out of conference matchups, a lot of times the players that are playing on the team now, they weren't even in high school when some of these matchups were contractually put down on paper. And so I think it's sometimes unfair to say like they don't play anybody. Well, I, it is what it is. Like the university makes these, the contracts are made. It's like it's just kind of what it is, and you have to play who you play. And I think that the big factor for Michigan, in my opinion, is that they haven't looked bad yet. I mean, they struggled a little bit against Bowling Green in the first game, but other than that, they have been excellent. And I think they're a really good football team. So unless this whole thing has been happening for so long and is so rampant that it clouds every single thing that they have had in terms of success, I just don't see how this is going to tip the scales in any way when Kirby Smart is now probably like, okay, let's stop sending people to games because Michigan got caught.
Right. I mean, and are there are there any teams that we haven't seen struggle this year? Um, at some point in time. Now, as I'm saying that, the two teams that maybe pop into my mind, Oklahoma, right? Now, granted, they had a great game with Texas, but they didn't, they played a great opponent. It was a close game with a great opponent. Washington played a close game with Oregon, but again, great game against a great opponent. I don't think you'd classify that as them struggling because they just
No,
kind of snuck by a small margin. But I'm talking about a better team, a elite team struggling against a lesser opponent, right? A definitively lesser opponent, and we've seen that a lot this year. We've seen it out of Georgia, we've seen it out of Alabama. If we saw Florida State against Boston College. I mean, Notre Dame gets the they don't play anybody shit all the time, and I just think that it's the weakest argument that you can make toward if that's all you have to say about somebody is they don't play anybody. Well, based off what? Like your perception of like people say that because like, well, they're playing Duke. Duke's a basketball school. But again, like you obviously know nothing about the Duke football team this year or even North Carolina. A lot of people would hear North Carolina and be like, North Carolina's a basketball school, you know what I mean? And like they don't they aren't educated enough on how good some of these football programs are. I mean, just in a vacuum this year. What they did last year doesn't matter. You know what I
yeah,
mean?
it's
And
what
what
they
they
did
do
this
next
year.
or what they might do next year doesn't matter. I mean, it's what's happening right now. How good are these teams today, this year? And
If I knew you were going to do that, I'd have the Rock right here on the soundbar. It doesn't matter what you think. I just
That's
don't
right.
have it. I'm sorry.
But
You need to tell me these
yeah,
things ahead of
I mean,
time.
if you want to criticize a team, and I'm not saying you got to be a statistician by any means, I'm not, but at least come with some substance of some kind. Have a valid argument of like, well, I think that they have a really bad offensive line. Like, I mean, like we talk about USC. USC's defense is, as Budge would say, Swiss cheese, right? I mean, a lot of holes in that defense. They've struggled all year against everyone, So, I
Everyone.
mean, yes, literally everyone. Um, Ray Charles knows that USC has a bad defense. So it's
Come
it's just
on. That
it's
was low.
bizarre.
that was that was good.
S- You there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay,
You
no,
just kind of
okay.
stopped. You stopped in the
No,
middle of a
well, sorry,
sentence. That's
no.
why I
So
was
I'm
like,
gonna say this now. So my father, who is listening, he went walking by and somewhat in the vicinity, and so I hear us like 10 seconds ago, and
okay.
it sounded like he was walking closer to me, and I was about to be like, "What are you doing?" You know what I mean? Like you're distracting me so much because I can like hear it. And I'm trying to talk. I'm trying to
I could
think.
hear it.
Oh, really?
Yes,
Yeah.
I could hear it, and I
So
was like,
that's
"What is that?"
probably
I
what.
thought maybe he was watching Kyle Schwarber hit a massive bomb to make it 2-1 Diamondbacks here in Game 4 of the NLCS. Because believe it or not, there is no college football on tonight. I was kind of
That's
surprised
a
by that.
lie.
Is it?
SMU and Temple, but it
Are they
might be over
really?
now. It might be over now.
Because I was looking at the scores from for a little bit later to check out the games, and I didn't see one that said Friday, so I apparently missed that one. All right. So the other thing I will say is that even if you are stealing all of the signs, you still have to execute. And obviously, with all the teams that are stealing signs, there's a lot of them that are not executing, and Michigan seems to be able to do that. So we will watch the story as it unfolds the rest of the year.
That's
So go
That's
ahead.
a great point though about execution. I think we should talk about that for a minute, just in general,
Yes.
because it's a criticism that came upon, and valid in some cases, that came upon Notre Dame and say, "Hey, your offense." They asked Marcus Freeman, like, "Your offense is a little predictable. It seems the play calling seems a little predictable," and he said what I know to be true, which is um, there's an overwhelming majority of the time, team defenses know what the offense is going to run anyways, or at least have it narrowed down to a couple possibilities if they've done their homework properly. And I can tell you that that's true. And when I was coaching the premier team in the area, every time they lined up, based off their formation and how they lined up, they had so many tells. We literally knew exactly what play they were going to run probably 95% of the time. But guess what? We
You
still
couldn't
couldn't
stop
stop
them.
them.
Yes.
We still
Because
couldn't stop them because you still have to execute.
and like we talked about the other night about Belichick and the Patriots, talent matters. It matters at this level too. So even if you know exactly what the other team is going to do, you have to be able to still do it. And the quarterback has to be able to make throws. The defense has to be able to jump the ball. They have to be able to do what they have to do to make tackles. There's a lot of things that happen. It's like the baseball steroids thing. Barry Bonds didn't need steroids to be a good hitter, but not everybody who took steroids was a good hitter before then. So like hitting, playing football, playing defense, a lot of these things schematically, it sounds easy. Yeah, we know what they're going to do. Well, you think you know what they're going to do, even knowing the signs. You think they know what you're going to do. But if the talent is better on one side versus the other, it is going to matter. And I do think that that has something to do with it because I think a lot of people fool themselves into believing that every team isn't doing it. Like when the Patriots got caught, and I'm not going to sit here and tell you that they didn't do it. They did it, right? Everybody's like, well, our team wouldn't do that. Bullshit. Your team would do that. And your team is probably like, damn, we can't do that anymore because now we got caught. Like every time a team gets caught cheating or you call it cheating, then it's going to happen, right? The teams are going to be like, okay, so we can't do that. And now I think that Michigan probably uncovered what some other schools may be doing. And it's called trying to gain a competitive advantage. But again, at the end of it all, you have to have the talent and you have to execute. You can have the best plan in action, but it doesn't matter. It's kind of like in on these fourth down calls, whether it's in college or the NFL, more so in the NFL. And it's like people will say, well, they didn't get the first down, so it was a bad call. Not all the time. A lot of times the process is right. You made the right decision. Your team didn't execute. The execution does matter. And you have to be smart enough to know that. And that's why I think something like this needs to be looked at in that way. And I think execution does matter. And some people I think aren't willing to even go into that. And I think also people aren't willing to do some of their homework when they are trying to analyze who played who. Like when somebody says this year that Notre Dame didn't play anybody, Well, that's a bunch of crap. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's a bunch of crap because they've played ranked teams like 6 weeks in a row. No other team is doing that. And it comes down to, well, I don't think Louisville's very good. Well, I don't give a crap what you think. It doesn't matter what you think for real. It matters what the people that are assessing this for real, the AP poll, and what's actually happening. So, just my little soapbox. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk, everybody.
No, you're right, and, the whole thing about people saying that, their team wouldn't do that, like you said, that's total crap, and if your team it's one of 2 things, either, if your team's not doing something to try to get an edge, they're idiots, and they either haven't been caught yet, or they're so bad that nobody cares to even bother turning them in, because you
Yeah.
don't ever hear the bad teams never get turned in for cheating,
They're
right?
like,
Like,
oh, that's so cute.
yeah, like, the bad teams never get turned in for cheating ever. It's always one of the better teams, one of the top dogs, man. The Patriots at the height of their dynasty, Michigan now, that, they're up there ranked number 2, and, by a lot of people's opinions, they think they're the best team in the country right now. So, that just comes with the territory, I guess.
But what always happens is when you become successful, people want to try to find holes in it. It doesn't matter what it is. You don't have to be a dynasty. You don't have to be a pro team. It doesn't matter. A lot of times in your life, if you start to become successful, let's take weight loss for an example. When I lost all of my weight, I found out who my friends were because some people stopped being my friends because they were like, oh, we're upset that you're at the top now. You're no longer below us. And that's what we always do here. So Jonah does have a question for us, and I think that it is a good philosophical discussion to have. And we're going to get to the Heisman a little bit later, but we can jump to it now. So if you're looking at the Heisman, before we even get into anything that's happened week 6, 7, and what's coming up, I think the same 5 candidates are still on the Heisman watch, and it's Michael Penix Jr., who, by the way, did you watch game day this past week?
Just bits and pieces. I didn't watch it as intently as I have in, previous weeks.
So Desmond Howard, did you hear him say we got to bring that big Penix energy? He said Michael Penix's name wrong, and he was like, it was
No.
awesome. He's like, we got to bring that big Penix energy, and I'm like, he's what? So that's amazing.
That's the stuff that we do, man. We
I know.
mispronounce names,
So
so
we could be on game days, what I'm hearing. Anyway, so you got Michael Penix Jr., Caleb Williams, Bo Nix, Jordan Travis, and I think on the fringes, Cam Ward out in Washington State, because I think the last couple games have probably exposed them a little bit. So Jonah wants to know, does USC's record affect Caleb Williams' Heisman chances? I don't think it's quite that directly correlated. I think that it has to do with how did he play in some of these games. Like, let's take an example of this. So, how did he play against Notre Dame? Well, he didn't play that great against Notre Dame. But what were the factors? Notre Dame's defense couldn't be stopped. Like, that was one of those performances, a virtuoso performance. I don't think it would have mattered. I really don't think it would have mattered. Or let's take the Colorado game, for example. They only won by 7. They didn't cover. He had a great game. I think he only threw 1 pick, but the defense was terrible. So I don't think your record is necessarily indicative of whether you deserve the Heisman, but for a team like USC who has national championship aspirations, I do think if they lose, let's say, 3 games this year, that may hurt his Heisman chance. What do you think?
so I think that it's, what's going to impact Caleb Williams' Heisman chances is Caleb Williams' performance, right? And Caleb Williams' performance is also going to impact USC's record. So while at the end of the year they might have a poor record and Caleb Williams may not win the Heisman. So I do think they're connected in that sense because if he doesn't play well enough for them to have a very good record, then
Of
he's probably
course.
not going to win the Heisman, right? If he plays poorly enough that they go, I don't know, that they lose 3 or 4 games, then he's probably not going to win the Heisman. So, is it directly related to the record? No, but his performance dictates the record, and it also dictates if he's a Heisman contender. And
Yes.
I'll say this with that defense, he's going to have to play like a Heisman winner to
Yes.
keep them in any sort of contention for the college football playoff.
I mean, he's looked
Um,
good most of the year. Let's put it
yeah,
that way. He
for
has, right?
sure, but
He's
he's
played
gonna
Heisman
have
level
to. Like
football.
he is all they have, and I don't mean it because I know they have a lot of talent around. There's other talented guys on that team, but they go as he goes. Like he is the X factor for USC, and they're only going to go as far as he can take them.
Yes.
And so they can't he cannot afford to have any more games like he had last Saturday against Notre Dame. It just can't
No.
happen. He threw 3 interceptions in that game. Last year, I think he only threw 3 interceptions all season.
Yeah.
So now is that probably won't happen again this year. If it does, then I guarantee he won't win the Heisman. But
No.
um, it's not all just Caleb Williams. There's a couple other guys that are gonna have a say in this thing,
Yeah.
and Michael Penix Jr. is one of them for sure.
Oh, I think so. But I think that Caleb Williams could play Heisman level football and USC still could lose 3 or 4 games with that defense. And so, in that regard, like, I think that the other thing that will hurt his Heisman chances are the fact that he plays on the West Coast, too. I mean, that does hurt a lot of these West Coast. I mean, maybe not so much for USC, but you do
Well,
hear a lot about that in the Heisman. A lot of these guys are like, I already voted because I don't watch West Coast football.
with as good as what's gonna help him and Michael Penix Jr. and Bo Nix is that the Pac-12 is really good this year. So there's a lot of
Yes.
more people are watching the Pac-12 because of how good the teams are this year. And so that's one thing where I totally agree that in the past that's definitely been a factor. I don't think it will be this year just because of how good the top half of the Pac-12 is.
Yeah. So to answer the question, it probably will, but I think what will happen is USC's record will be looked at, and then the next thing will be, well, how did Caleb play in all of these games? And if, as you said, they lost and it's because he didn't play well the same way that he didn't play well against Notre Dame, then no, he is not going to win the Heisman. So the Heisman, I think, is still very much up for grabs. I mean, you could make the argument that Big Penix Energy has the
So great.
has the yes, has the inside track to it because he has played well and has a signature win now, but still a lot of football to be played.
Yeah.
So, can we go and do a little back to the future, get in the DeLorean and take a little bit of a trip to the past since we missed last week?
Let's do it, man.
Okay, so let's talk very briefly about week 6. So I think the biggest marquee matchup was the Red River rivalry, which our resident recruit here picked successfully by taking Oklahoma to win that game. And boy, that was a game. Like last year, Oklahoma loses 49 nothing, I believe. And many people had a lot of things to say about Brent Venables. And a lot of people thought Texas is back. Every time Texas wins, they're back. So Texas comes into this game, and in my opinion, I felt like both teams kind of needed this. What did you think about that?
Oh yeah. I mean, both teams were desperate for that win, not just because it's a rivalry game, but it just the implications nationally from that game because they were both highly ranked teams, and so it was going to have a big impact on where they go from here, right? And like we'll see a rematch most likely at the
I
end of the
hope
year in the
so.
Big 12
Oh, I
championship
hope
game, I'm
so.
sure.
If it's anything like this game was, and the way that it finished, Oklahoma showed a lot of, to use a term that you like, a lot of grit at the end of that game to come back and steal the victory, really, from them. And Texas, I think, had to mount a comeback because they were down in this game too. So it's what you want out of a game of this magnitude, out of a rivalry game, to see these two schools that hate each other, like absolutely hate each other, play down to the wire. And Oklahoma got the big win. Brent Venables gets his big signature win thus far in his coaching tenure at Oklahoma. And it was pretty awesome, man. I thought it was a great representation of that rivalry because last year, 49 nothing, unless you're a Texas fan, you don't want to see that.
No, it was an elite college football game. I wish it would have gone the other way. There's something about Oklahoma, man. It's not even Oklahoma. There's something about Brett Venables that I just don't care for all that much.
Really?
Yeah, I don't know why. I really couldn't tell you what it is exactly, but there's
That's
just
fair.
something about the guy that I'm like, I don't know, man. Like,
So, Brent, if you're one of the 5 people watching in this feed right now, coach just doesn't like you. Sorry about that. You can go ahead and leave, but just make sure to invite 10 of your other friends.
please.
Yes, exactly. So also, I think USC barely squeaked by Arizona then, and now looking at what we know about what happened the week after, it seems like that might have been, or did they play Arizona State? I thought they played Arizona that week.
Honestly, I'd have to look. I'd have to
Yeah,
pull
but
up the archives.
they squeaked by is my point. So that was kind of a foreboding look into what their future was going to be. I think we need to now go to the University of Miami and the kneel down fiasco that has been talked into the ground. You and I talked about it offline, but like I said, we didn't have a show last week, so we've got to talk about it here. I I have never, I think I said this to you. I think this is a direct quote. I've never quite seen anything that incompetent at the end of a game in my life. And now that I've had 2 weeks to process this, I still think it's true.
Inexcusable, absolutely inexcusable. I do not know how that I mean, and we talked about it, right? There's speculation that they were trying to get the running back 100 yards rushing
Don't
or
care.
something like that. Okay, so if that's true, that's terrible. Okay? Like, that's worse, in my opinion, than if you just lost track of the situation somehow.
Yes.
Like, if you intentionally, like, knew exactly what you were doing, like, that is worse than if it just the moment you just got lost in the moment, didn't realize that you could just take a couple knees and go home with the win. Which is I mean, both things are pretty absurd, but I can't wrap my head around it, man. Like, did
Still can't.
again, like I think I asked you, we talked on the phone. I can't recall the answer. Was there ever an explanation given?
The explanation given was my bad from Mario Cristobal. That's basically what the explanation was.
What else can you say? I mean,
Oh,
because
there isn't anything.
if you would have tried to explain your way out of that, like you would have lost everyone's respect. I mean, like, so credit to him, I guess, for just owning it,
Yes.
and not trying to like coach speak his way out of it.
Say what you want about the media. I know that many of the media members didn't play football, but as Dave from Political Football would say, I don't have to be an astronaut to know to keep my helmet on in space. You don't have to have played the game in order to know. Most people who are aware of the game of football and who are casual fans of football know mostly that if I tell you you have 30 seconds left, the other team has no timeouts, and you have the football, what do you do here? The only answer is kneel the football, get the win, and go home. That's what it's all about, getting the win. And now, if you fast forward a week, Miami loses that game that they shouldn't have lost. They lose to UNC, which is a team they probably should have lost to. And now they're out of the discussion. They're completely out of the national championship discussion when they could have potentially still been in it. And that is a just horrific, horrific mistake. I know many people have gone on Twitter and social media to show evidence that the fumble wasn't actually a fumble. But again, before then, you kneel down the football. And after that, you gave up two big pass plays knowing that the game was on the line. Everything that Miami did there was inexcusable. And if you gave me a million times, a million out of a million times, you kneel the football. Like,
Yeah.
I don't think there's an explanation that would say you shouldn't do that.
Yeah, you cannot blame the officials,
No,
for missing the call or
no.
the review crew for not, uh, overturning it. You can't blame the defense even for giving up a couple big plays, uh, because none of those things should have even had the opportunity to occur. The game should have been over, and it's it's so crazy because Mario Cristobal has been around the block, man. Like, this guy has
Yes.
coached a lot of big time football, and that's what is crazy about it.
It
I
just,
mean,
oh, I
and didn't
can't.
you say there's people asking, like, if it's a fireable offense? Well, no, it's not a fireable offense. I mean, but it's certainly concerning, you know? It's just so weird. It's one of those things, it's so elementary that it's like, I don't even know how you approach it, you know? Does the I mean, it would seem absurd for the AD to have to, like, have a meeting with Mario Cristobal and be like, "Hey, man, so what happened there?" You know what I mean? Like, I mean,
And they probably did though. It probably was like, so I have to assume that he was called into the AD's office and the AD didn't say like, so what happened there, man? He's like, that better not happen again. Like, you
yeah,
know what I
that's
mean?
about
Like,
all you
that's
could
it.
say. I mean, because there's no like I said, there's no explanation for it. There's no good explanation for it, and it's just perplexing, you know? Maybe Mario Cristobal had money on Georgia Tech, I don't know.
But this is the kind of thing though. So Miami is a fan base, in my opinion, that is extremely delusional in the fact that they feel and think that they are still relevant in the national spotlight. But really, they haven't been. I
Are you
would
talking about the
say
Dallas Cowboys?
could be very similar fan bases in that regard. Miami has had a ton of success, and I got to see the 2001 Miami team play live. It was one of the best teams I've ever seen play live. There's like 6 or 7 Hall of Famers on that squad. But that is not the team that they're putting out there now. And remember, we went through the Al Golden years. We went through, well, what was the guy? Manny Diaz. We went through the Manny Diaz era. And now we're in the Cristobal. Now, Cristobal is a guy coming from Oregon, right? Who came with a pedigree, came with a connection to the school. And this guy knows what he's doing. So this is just a really, I feel like, hey, He goes to bed at night and wakes up the next morning and says, okay, so that's never going to happen again. He seems like that kind of guy. Like he knows that that's never going to happen again. But it could not have happened to a better fan base because that fan base, I think, was starting to believe that they were going to be relevant in the national picture again because the ACC seems to have had a minor resurgence, although it's come back down to earth now. And then all of a sudden, boom, this play happens and it completely tanks their relevancy, completely tanks it. So you're a homer if you still think that that play shouldn't have happened that way, that the ref screwed you, whatever. You should have knelt the football, hard stop, and you deserve everything that came after it.
What happens if it happens again this season?
Oh, he's fired. He's absolutely fired. Like, but okay, so
It
the
won't,
better
but
no, not that, but the better question is what happens if something less egregious happens? Like another miscue, not of this magnitude, because this is of a magnitude that just nobody can fathom. Like I still can't fathom it. I see it happen and I still can't fathom it. What happens if it's like a clock management issue? Doesn't use the timeouts properly or misses or misinterprets some kind of analytics decision or whatever it is, right? Do you start to get more on the hot seat? Does his seat become warmer when this happens? Because something like this is never going to happen again. But what happens again, because every time Mario Cristobal makes a mistake now, they're going to go back to this, right?
oh, for sure. Yeah, like this isn't going to go away, right? This is going to be in his file per
Oh,
se
yeah, on his chart.
forever,
Yeah, so be like,
forever. And
all
so
right, we have your chart here.
I want to tell a little story
Oh,
that's
good.
in the same vein. So back when I was coaching, so every Thursday we would have our walkthrough, and we would go through, we'd go through a script of plays, like kind of our openers or whatever, and then we'd go through all the special teams, make sure everybody knew who was on every special team, who the backups were, all that stuff, and then we would run through like we had sort of a game simulation thing. We'd kick the ball off, the offense would come out, or the defense, whoever, and then we just simulate different situations. So the kids were, just familiar, just reiterating that, okay, if we get in this situation, this is what happens. Okay, it's fourth down, get the punt team on the field. Um, whatever the case may be, we're backed up in our own end zone, so this is going to be a tight punt, just different stuff. Take a safety on a punt, like every situation you could come across in the game. Well, the last thing we would do is like a 2-minute drill, and we would practice that all the time. And so, like, as we get the ball downfield, um, we'd say we were out of timeouts, so like we'd complete a pass, and then, I'd be screaming, kill, 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 and they have to run up, get in the line of scrimmage, spike the ball. And thank God this happened in the walkthrough and not a game. But this is like we're a couple weeks into the season, and so we've done this a few times, and we're doing the 2-minute drill. We're driving, and on air too. So there's no defense or whatever. It's all on air, and kill, 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 kill. Get up on the ball. The quarterback gets it, takes a knee. He takes a knee, and I about like crawled out of my skin, man. I'm like, what are you doing? What are you doing? Like, I mean, because the very last thing we would always do is victory formation and take a knee at the end, to like wrap the practice up at
Sure.
the end of the, whatever, because it would be 2-minute drill, score to take the lead or whatever, kick off, or I don't know, or maybe we'd recover an onside kick or some shit like that, and then victory formation. But um, yeah, I was like, you got to be kidding me. And now 17-year-old kid, whatever, who knows? He's probably like stoned or something. I have no idea, but like, um, yeah, dude, it was wild. And
Oh,
I have
wow.
so many. I have like a litany of stories that are very similar to that. Just stuff where you're like, what are you thinking?
Well, on that note, we have a special guest who has new imaging
Yeah,
now. Yes, James, come on. No,
we
you
need
cannot
a
have that. Come over
we
here,
need an
buddy.
intro song.
I know, right?
If only we could play the Paw Patrol
Oh,
song.
all right. So we only have one pair of headphones here. So James is not going to be able to hear everybody. Okay, dude? You can't hear everybody. Say hi to Coach Brad.
Hi, Coach Brad.
Okay, excellent.
James,
So
hi, James.
James, yes. So James is our guest picker every single week. He now has a new image.
Daddy,
Hold on.
I need some.
Yes, hold on. He is now. I don't have any headphones. He is now 4-1. His last pick was picking Oklahoma.
Hey, Daddy,
Yes.
hey, please say you have
Yes.
with me.
All right. Let's get him set up. Hi, James.
Okay. So, James, you're 4-1. Now, I will say this. Normally, he's going to pick one game, but he's now going to pick two because earlier this afternoon, he informed my wife of his first pick on the way home from school. Do you remember what that pick was, James?
Mm-hmm.
Who was it?
Alpha.
Air Force over Navy is his first pick. So, we are writing
Great
that down.
pick,
Okay.
James. Great
So,
pick.
now you're going to pick your real game, okay? All right. So, you need to say two schools for me. The first one, can you say Penn State?
Penn State.
Can you say Ohio State?
Ohio State.
Okay. Which one is going to win?
Ohio State.
Okay. So we now have Ohio State to beat Penn State and Air Force to beat Navy. Are you sure?
I mean Alpha.
Okay. Doubling down on Air Force. Say go Falcons.
Go Falcons.
Okay. Excellent. And he is not biased at all on this because his Uncle Mike is an Air Force Academy grad. So we have a family connection to this. All right,
Nice.
buddy. Can you show everybody your guests of honor here? We have Ghosty and
Nice.
we have Spidey here with us today.
Spidey.
And we have our Paw Patrol pajamas. So we are heading to bed. All right, buddy.
Close back. Guess
Yes.
what Ghosty does?
What does he do?
what does Ghosty do?
He press down.
Yes.
You press it
Ghosty
down?
shoots webs out of the front of her car. It's very
Oh,
exciting.
wow.
Okay, buddy. Are you ready to go to bed?
Yeah, but there's no in it.
I know. That's because they're downstairs. Are you ready to go to bed?
Mhm.
Can you tell everybody to have a great night?
Have a great night, everybody.
And
Good-
we'll see you next week.
See you next week.
Okay.
Good night, James.
Thank you, buddy.
All right. Couple solid picks.
I agree. And notice how he was very, like he was very confident. Hey, I love you, buddy.
There's a lot of conviction behind his Air Force pick for sure. Which,
That's
again,
been one of
I
them.
would too. Great pick.
I know.
Great pick.
I know. Very, very good pick. But he did inform my wife in the car about the Air Force pick. So that was cool. So we will see how James does next week. We will see. He has been on a roll. First pick he ever did on the show was the Super Bowl. He got that right. The only one he didn't get right was picking some Pac-12 action, and that was Oregon State took down Utah. So
Lot of respect for James' picks from one great prognosticator to another.
one great football prognosticator. By the way, I'm still laughing at when you said lovers of money. I still chuckle when you said that during the pick of the week this week. And if you haven't watched that, you should go look at that because that is on YouTube right now. By the way, I should tell you about the pick of the week. So a commenter came in on that video and you got the spread wrong because you said it was Illinois, I believe, who was a 2-point favorite.
I could have swore it was. I didn't see the
Wisconsin
about-
is a 3-point favorite, so you now have 5.5
Maybe it's
points to look
moved.
with.
Maybe it's moved.
from yesterday.
Maybe.
That's a big swing.
Let me look.
Anyway, no.
Go ahead.
What the commenter said is that you're working with 5.5 points now, so I think we can give you that.
Okay, so now, yeah, Illinois is a 3-point dog. Now, I swear, man, that they were a favorite because I remember being like, who knows? Maybe not. Maybe they were a 2.5-point favorite. Whatever. They're gonna win, so who cares?
Budge doesn't think so.
No, I know, and he's not wrong. Illinois played very well last week. Can't deny that.
No.
Wisconsin's quarterback's injured apparently. Didn't know that. Don't care.
Go Badgers.
They're coming off the ugly loss, that Iowa game, which I know you have on the list, and we can talk more about that here in a minute. But like again, like Luke Fickell's in his first year there. We talk about this all the time. You're trying to establish a culture, and I know some people hate hearing that, but you are trying to build a mentality within your team, and bouncing back from tough losses is one of the things that's at the top of that list. And so I expect, they're probably coming off a very focused week of practice. Illinois riding high after a big win at Maryland. And now Brett Bielema's been around the block, right? He was at Wisconsin. I mean, doesn't mean that he's familiar with Luke Fickell or whatever, but I mean, like he understands the university and whatever that's worth. But I just don't see it, man. I don't see it. There's not a great home environment at the U of I Memorial Stadium. It's and no knock on them, man. Like, they're just the Illini, unfortunately. If they were better, I'd probably be an Illinois fan instead of a Notre Dame fan. I would have grown up differently, I guess. But uh, Illinois doesn't have a Rudy, so screw
No.
him.
So the other thing that happened in week 6, speaking of teams that have squeaked by, so Colorado at that point squeaked by Arizona State, which I believe was a game that Budge was at. Now, that's not necessarily the interesting part because I think Colorado isn't what everybody thought they were after they started 3-0, but it's still a good story. But then you had Shadur Sanders, who was taunting the student section, flashing his watch. And I wanted to get your thoughts on that because you're somebody who you do have kind of an old school mentality to you, but you also have a new school view on things as well because somebody like Coach Prime, somebody like Pat McAfee, totally up your alley. But I feel like even though what Coach Prime is doing is awesome, in my opinion, it's a bad look for their star player to be flashing his $70,000 watch um, to the student section at Arizona State, who's a school that you should be better than. And you didn't exactly knock the socks off them. What do you think about that?
So my initial thought is act like you've been there before, sort of thing. Like, what do you have to prove to the Arizona State student section? I guess So that's one aspect of it. The other aspect of it that I think I've come to understand more as I've gotten older, which is almost the opposite, right? Normally, as people get older, they become more curmudgeony. But as I've gotten older, I think that I kind of acknowledge that if you're going to nurture a certain type of mindset, and you hear Coach Prime refer to them as, he's a dog and he's this and he's that. If you're going to nurture a certain kind of mindset, you've got to take some of the other stuff that comes along with it, right? If you're going to try to build this confidence and ask these guys to carry themselves with this confidence and this swagger, I guess you could call it, um, you gotta take the good with the bad. You gotta take some of this. It's very similar, I feel like, to the U back in the day. And it was just, and I think that, they kind of embraced it. Jimmy Johnson embraced it. It was, he wanted to see that stuff because it was just all part of the attitude that came along with it. And I think that you're seeing that there. And maybe the way Coach Prime sees it is that, hey, if I develop the mindset and the attitude, all the rest will follow. We're going to get some talent in here. We're going to get all this other stuff, but again, that doesn't mean that there isn't a line somewhere. And taunting the student again, it's just like some of that act like you've been there before a little bit. I don't mind celebrating. I don't mind, taunting the students a little bit, because I'm sure they're giving it to you pretty good. So, give it back, I guess. But I I don't know. It's a tough deal. I don't know where that line is, and really it's not up for, I guess it's person to person. You make up your own mind about what you feel is personally acceptable for you to continue to be a fan of a specific team or player.
Yeah, I think it also comes down to like the type of taunting that they're doing. So, like, flashing a very expensive watch to the student section is less about the football game and it's more about how much they're getting paid. And the next week, when they blew that huge lead, Dion said in the press conference, like, these guys got to figure out whether they're in like with football or in love with football. And I think that's the kind of stuff that he is referring to because you're not at the University of Colorado to make money. Like, he's making people money. The kids are making something for their likeness. But the point is, you're there to play football. And if you're flashing your watch, like this expensive watch, it to me is like it's not about the football. Like you're not flaunting the fact that you won. It'd be one thing if you're doing this, flying your colors and stuff like that, or as you said, giving it to the student section. But the kind of taunting to me is a bad look when you're not playing up to the level that I think people think that you should be playing up to. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, did he have an actual watch on?
Yeah, he had like a $70,000
Why?
watch on.
That's so stupid. Okay, that's dumb. You should if he was just like, I don't know, mocking a watch or something, that whatever. But like the guy actually was wearing a watch
I think so, yeah.
while he was playing. What expensive one apparently. First of all, Matty Ice, I don't even know. You may be Iceman. You may be a fan of expensive watches, but it's one thing I've never necessarily understood why people. I don't mind a nice watch. I don't wear a watch. Um, I don't have anything against watches in general, which would be weird. But like
No, it wouldn't.
right? But like I have a hard stance I'm taking against timepieces that you can wear on your wrist.
Yeah, put it on the
Um,
poll, Guillermo. Do you have anything against watches? At Iceman and Coach on Twitter.
um, the like $70,000 watch or whatever. Like if the watch costs more than like I'll even give you like $200. Any more than that, it's just like why? Why? It doesn't tell time any better than the $50 watch.
No, it's like anything else. My father looks at me and says, I have 3 pairs of shoes that I've had since 1978. And that's cool, right? Everybody has their thing, but it is weird to me to wear a watch on the football field. Like, where do you got to be? Like, you're there. You don't have anywhere else to be, so you need to know what time it is. Like, I wear a smartwatch. That's the only watch that I wear. So I don't have a watch collection. I used to, but now with the connectivity of devices, I'm a total sheep. I wear everything that has me connected in every way because, and tell me if you agree with this. In the business that we're in, let's call this the business that we're in, you and I kind of almost have to be more connected, right? Like we have to know what's going on in the sports world in order to be able to have some credibility to do this.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it there is some sort of an obligation. Now, it doesn't feel like it because we enjoy
Yes.
watching sports and stuff. But yeah, there's some sort of an obligation to like have a clue about what's going on, and things like that for sure. Um, and I tell you what, man, this last Saturday it was tough for me because now, granted, or luckily, there was a couple great games on, like the Washington Oregon game, especially, and then obviously Notre Dame played later, but like
Yeah.
that loss to Louisville really took a lot out of me. Like I'm
That
not gonna lie, like I mean, it's just like it kind of like it put a couple chinks in the armor as far as like my passion for college football. Not that my passion, but just like it emotionally impacted me to the point where like it affected my excitement for college football Saturday a little bit because I was like, man, it just didn't feel like it meant as much,
I
which is
also wasn't
silly.
watching football too, which didn't help.
Yeah, which is
So it's
silly, but
not silly.
um but yeah, man, there's definitely like for us to do this, and that's what's funny, right? Is it kind of sheds light on how much or how relevant or impactful it is for these major sports personalities to have a staff that gathers all this information for them. Because you and I mean, and we're far from experts, like we make mistakes all the time on spreads,
Whoa, whoa,
names,
whoa. First of all,
records.
don't
You know
lump
what I
me
mean?
into your lack of expertise here.
Sure. Well, names, records,
Joe
so
Girardi right
there's a
now.
lot of stuff. Yeah, so there's a lot of things that we mess up. That's even with making an effort to like pay attention. But
Yes.
now we're not like I'm not obsessively watching sports, tracking
No,
sports, um,
but you and I
because I
couldn't
just
do this watching no sports at all. Like we could not.
no, it would
No.
be a sham,
Absolute sham. Although I am doing this show having not watched a lick of football in week 6, but we'll talk about that. I was at a casino with a 3-year-old.
which is awesome.
I agree. So that's probably what it was. You knew I was at the casino and you had to watch Notre Dame lose to Louisville, which I'm sure uh, was a little bit tough. Plus, Louisville, there's a little connection there, but we'll save that for another time. So one last thing from week 6, Jimbo once again loses to Nick Saban. Jimbo has got to be fired, right? Like there's no way he survives this season. Is there?
I don't know, man. I think it depends on how it finishes because that buyout's got to be
It's
astronomical.
the only thing, right? That's the
Um,
only thing.
Probably.
That's it.
Now, it may not matter.
Johnny Manziel's going to pay it.
Because they've got yeah, right. They've got, I'm sure they've got boosters with deep pockets that
Texas.
would pull the trigger on that thing in a heartbeat. So we'll see. But
Do you think a
thing is
booster
that
is called? They've definitely called things,
oh,
right?
this yeah, these conversations have happened.
More than once.
I'm certain that there's probably like a ringleader of the boosters, right? Like the Buddy Garrity, if you watch Friday Night Lights,
Oh,
I'm sure there's a Buddy Garrity of College Station that is like that's in the AD's ear that's like, hey, I've got the money, I've rounded up the guys, I've got the cash. So the moment you decide you want to do this, we've got it.
great pull from you. Very, very good. Buddy Garrity, great pull from you.
That's my
Big
one
fan.
contribution to the show
It
tonight.
is not your one contribution. But Jimbo this is a roster the last 2 years that's way too talented to be this mediocre. And I know that the buyout is significant, but that, in my opinion, is the only factor that is preventing this. Now, this is a good segue for our man Jonah's question. Jonah is very existential tonight, by the way, so very much in the philosophical discussion. So I don't know if you've seen Ted Lasso. I have, or I've seen most of Ted Lasso. But the concept of Ted Lasso, for those of you who haven't, is that a college football coach, I believe he coached in the Midwest. I think he was like in Iowa somewhere or in Indiana somewhere, like Wichita State or something, and he goes over to basically be the manager of what is a fictional Premier League team. And he's very successful. Things happen. So Jonah wants to know if that could happen in reverse. Could a Premier League coach come here and be successful in college football? I'm going to let you answer this first. I have an opinion, but I want to hear your thoughts first as somebody who's coached.
I feel like it would be very arrogant to say no, because I think that anybody can learn nearly anything that they are committed to learning. So, and the one of the biggest things of coaching is inspiring people, right? And conveying, your thoughts, your culture, and getting kids, or yeah, kids in this case, and they're still young men, to embody um this persona or this culture you're trying to build, getting them to be motivated to play hard, to make the right decisions off the field and stuff like that. I mean, there's a lot more that goes into it outside of the X's and O's. So to say it's impossible, like I said, would be a very arrogant thing of me to say. And I think about, I mean, I'm pretty sure like Mike Leach had a very unusual progression, um, kind of through coaching. I mean, I know it was football, but like I know he coached some like football in Europe and stuff, like, and maybe weird rules. And I mean, he had some kind of interesting things along the way. And so, I mean, maybe it helps you bring a kind of a different, fresh perspective to things. The guy that coached the Soviet hockey team that created the Soviet hockey dynasty through the 60s, 70s, 80s, never played hockey in his life, not a single time. That like Russia, the Soviet Union, was not um known for hockey at all. They played some type of like a field hockey or something, and then they just grabbed this guy and said, "Hey, like you're going to be the coach of our hockey team, our ice hockey team." And because of that, because he wasn't already of the like he wasn't sort of pigeonholed into like you have to do things this way, he created an entirely new style of hockey that was highly successful. So you never know. I mean, you could bring a guy in with a totally different, fresh perspective that could come up with new ideas that current coaches have never considered.
I think that your dad, who says that head coach, yes, position and coordinator, I think would be more difficult. I think he's kind of saying what you're alluding to. I think that the nuances of this are that I think, yes, coordinator would be very tough because in order to be a coordinator, you're in the weeds. It's about details. I think you had to have had a lot of coaching experience to be able to coach either the offense or the defense. But I think the head coaching part, I think the culture part that you're speaking to is relevant. I think somebody could come in and cultivate the kind of atmosphere and culture that they want out of this football team. I think professional would be tough, but college, I think that they could do it. The only thing that would concern me is that the nature of being a soccer coach and the nature of being a football coach are two different things because in English Premier League football, you have 11 guys out there, but you don't substitute very often. And the strategies that you have out there, you really don't make micro changes to the strategy throughout the entirety of a half because the players are out there for that long. The clock just continues to run. There is no stoppage in play. So there aren't many opportunities for you to put your personal stamp on game management situations. When you come to football, a lot of those down by down decisions can be very, very critical. I'm talking about time management, when to use your timeouts, the situation. If you've never done it, hockey, I think, is a lot easier to adapt to because it's a faster paced game. Guys are switching out so often, and you don't have, again, like your lines are set for every single game. So in the game, you're not going to be making the kind of changes that you could make in a football game. They always talk about like halftime adjustments in football. I would assume that it happens even more frequently than that, that you're trying to make adjustments as it happens. If you have a lot of really special and detail-oriented coordinators out there, that definitely helps with the X's and O's part. I would just be concerned about the game management portion of it, and would a coach be able to come in having no knowledge of it and having never done it before? How long would it take them to adapt? And in today's market, are you gonna give the coach enough time to adapt? Because a lot of these schools are gonna fire somebody if they're not successful after, what, 3 seasons?
Yeah, if that,
Yeah.
anymore. No, I mean, I get what you're saying, and I think you're right. What would you say, like, like, what major American sports coach, as far as do you think is the most similar to, like, how a European soccer coach functions? Like a baseball manager, maybe?
Ye To an extent.
Basketball coach? But basketball coaches, I feel like, are very involved, like calling defensive sets, calling offensive sets.
Well, you're running plays. So like I guess
Yeah,
in soccer you're running set pieces and things like that. But they're things that you've practiced and the things that they're doing in a basketball game are things you've practiced. But I think the substitution element of it, I think it is baseball because baseball, once a guy's out, he's out. And that's the
yeah.
same thing in soccer. Like if you take out Bryce Harper, who's up to bat right now with 2 runners on, and you take him out, he's out of the game. He can't come back. In soccer, it's the same thing. You take Messi off the field, he's out. So when you strategically take a guy out is very important. But in baseball too, there are so many microtransactions that take place. Think about all the signs that happen from just having a runner on first base. Every single pitch is dictated by something that's happening in the dugout. So a soccer coach, that doesn't happen quite as often. And I think that they are less influential, whereas a football coach has to be more influential and I think has a little bit more responsibility. But do I think that somebody could come in knowing nothing about baseball and coach a baseball team? Yeah, I do think that. But I think that what would be lost is the lack of experience. And in baseball, no matter what the analytics tell you, you sometimes have to go with your gut and just make the right decision. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, we saw it Little Big League, right? I
Yes.
mean, the kid, he managed the Twins.
Great reference by your dad. Although Shooter McGavin still going on there. Has a great Twitter account, by the way, if you ever want to follow him. Oh, we have
I've
Winston
seen
walking
that a
around
little
here
bit.
too, by the way. Our next
Does Winston want to make
recruit
a pick?
guest. No, Winston does not want to make a pick. Winston is scared. I don't know what he's doing up here. I guess the door never got closed on the way downstairs. So that is how this works. All right. So let's move on to week 7 very, very quickly. You mentioned Oregon and Washington, probably the best game I watched this year. What did you think?
Yeah, it was a great game, man.
Whew.
Like, there was a lot of what I loved about it as a coach, and not even you don't have to be a coach to like think about it this way, but there were a lot of coaching decisions that happened throughout that game that you could sort of analyze, right, and discuss and have an opinion on. And that's fun when that happens because I mean, those are decisions that directly impact the outcome of the game. And I understand why they're made. And me and you were kind of debating. I think we talking. Yeah, we were talking about it a little bit because we
We
were
were.
debating.
It was the end of the first
On
half.
yeah, we were debating on some of those decisions as the game went on, and kind of and it's funny because hindsight's always 20/20, so
Always.
they don't take the field goal, they try to score at the end of the first half, and then later in the second half, it's like, man, those 3 points would have been nice right now and stuff. But at the moment, I totally understood why they didn't take the field goal, so, um
So here's my argument to why so normally I'm with you. Normally I think in a game like this when you know that the offense of the other team is going to be very aggressive, you need to be aggressive. The only reason that I would say at the end of the first half is because it's the end of the half. So if you have the opportunity to get any sort of points on the board, you should take it. If this is 5 minutes to go in the second half, yeah, go for it for sure. Because touchdowns are going to win you this football game, no doubt. But I think at the end of that game, at the end of that half in particular, there's what, 6 seconds left. You don't have a chance to run more than one play. You won't get another chance. And they left points on the board, right? Like off the board. And I think that that's very, very important. And the reason that I kept saying is it would have been helpful is because that touchdown that they gave up at the end, it wouldn't have killed them. It would have actually been fine, right? They would have been tied. They would have had chances. And I think it comes down to how much time in the game, where they are, situational football. And I think they went for it a couple of times in the second half, but I thought they may not get the football back again. So like I'm cool with them going there. But at the end of the first half, when you know that you have an entire half of football, take some points and then reassess at halftime. That was the only argument that I would make. But normally I'm kind of for going it on fourth down, situation dependent. I like the aggressiveness because shit, Michael Penix Jr. is aggressive.
well, and I think that call That was the game right there. And not the fact that they made the decision they made, but the fact that they didn't get it. I think that changed the
It was rough.
trajectory of the game. And also, it was, like Dan Lanning said it in the interview going into half, and you could almost see it in his body language. Now he said all the right things, but you could just see that he was that's where I was like,
Deflated.
this is it, man. Like, I mean, that was the game. And at the time I didn't see it that way, of course, but I did kind of feel, I'm just like, you could tell that he was definitely a little deflated. And but he said it, we came here to win, and uh you have to make decisions like that. You have to make plays like that to beat a great team.
Yes.
And you have to go against the grain sometimes. And speaking of going against the grain, I don't know about you, but I absolutely love how much teams, not just in college, but in the NFL, are going for it on fourth down. I
Yeah.
love it so much.
Well, honestly, it's most of the time when you're going for it on fourth down, it's to get a yard, maybe two. And if you can't trust your offense to get that, and you're giving the ball away. I know people say, like, you shouldn't go for it because you're going to give the ball away. Punting is still a turnover. You're giving the ball away. It's just not considered a turnover for real because they don't call it a turnover on downs. But you're
Just a
giving
matter
the
of field position.
but you're giving yes, exactly. It's the only thing. Remember at the end of the NFC Championship game in 2020 when Tom Brady had the lead on Aaron Rodgers and Matt LaFleur down 7 decided to kick a field goal with like 2 minutes left. Stupid. None of that made sense because you kick the field goal, don't get yourself in any way in better shape because you still need a touchdown. Oh, and by the way, now you give the ball back to Tom Brady. Wouldn't you rather give the ball back to Tom Brady trying to go for a touchdown and maybe getting it? Because getting a touchdown increases your win percentage or whatever. Like you can win. And so I do like it. Now, I think that coaches need to be less cute. Looking at you, Brandon Staley, when you decide to go for it on fourth down. But even still, going for it on your 25, remember it was the Colts and Patriots? Belichick went for it 4th and 2 on their own 27, but they were going to punt and give the ball back to Peyton Manning, and he didn't want to do that. So let's try to get 2 yards. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. Execution. We talked about that earlier. I'm all for it. It was just that one particular play I thought they could have used the points here, and it may come into play later. And it did. It really did.
Well, and it creates so many interesting conversations because, like you said, coaches are getting too cute. But it all depends. Like, I think everyone's perspective on the play call comes down to whatever the result is, right? Because because it's like everybody expects it's going to be like what now the Eagles have made famous, the tush push. Everybody's expecting that to happen, and so people are trying to find little wrinkles off of it uh, to get the first down. And so if you see one of those things like a little end around or something that's successful, like, oh, great call. Great call. Everybody was selling out on the quarterback sneak or the run up the middle. Great call. But then when you see that and it fails, then everyone's screaming at their television. Why don't you just quarterback sneak it? You needed 6 inches. Blow. I mean, it's just it's so reactionary, but I love it though because I think it's we're seeing some creativity and some different things happening in those situations because it is not exclusively quarterback sneak.
No.
Um, hell, there's people that are throwing it, which
Yeah.
I think is fantastic.
Well, because sometimes play action works beautifully there, especially if you're a team that has established that you can run the football before then. And there's a lot of possibilities. And a lot of these coaches in college are, I mean, even in the NFL, they're doing it more often too. You're seeing a more new school approach to going for it on fourth down because what I think coaches are realizing now at the highest level of this sport is that points matter. You need to score as many points as possible, no matter what because that's how you're going to win football games. You're
Yeah.
not going to win football games doing what the Patriots are doing right now, scoring 17 points or less a game. It's just not going to happen for you.
No. And that's what's funny is they mentioned it during the Notre Dame broadcast the other night a million times, but um, I guess Al Golden, Notre Dame's defensive coordinator, he said multiple times, he goes, "It's not about yards." He goes, "I am not concerned about how many yards we give up. It's about points."
Yes.
It's just about keeping teams out of the end zone. We could give up 400 yards, but if they only score twice, like, who cares?
Listen, I'm going to go on a rant for a second. I'm going to go to fantasy football rant for a second because you just brought up something that I just ranted about over this weekend. All of you fantasy football commissioners out there, looking at you directly. Any of you who have defenses that lose points for giving up yards and not points need to get out and stop being commissioners, because there are defenses in the fantasy football realm who are great defenses in the NFL who give up no points, but somehow those of us who have them get nothing because they give up a lot of yards. Points matter, not yards. If you're giving up 17 points a game, but you're giving up 500 yards a game, it doesn't matter. You have a good defense. Stop it. Okay, I'm
No,
done.
I agree, man. My dad had a gripe about fantasy. Uh, um,
God, it pisses
he
me
had
off
a
so much.
he had a kicker, and I can't think of who his kicker is, but he missed a 50-yarder and then got like -3 points
Yeah,
or
that
-1 for missing the field. He's like, "Why?" He's like, "I get if you miss a 30-yard field goal." He's like, "But a 50-yarder, like
yeah.
you shouldn't be punished for that."
No, there yes, exactly. I'm not even gonna get into it because Rick and I could go all day about what I hate about fantasy football. Although the INC formation, that's my team name this
So
year.
I always thought that you should be able to draft like you draft a team's defense. I always thought it'd be fun if you could draft a team's offensive line and
Oh,
you
that'd be
got
good.
like rushing yards. You'd lose points if you gave up sacks, stuff like that. And I think it would bring more interest just to offensive lines in general. Like people would study them more, be more aware of who has good O lines, who doesn't. I've said that for a long time.
Speaking of a game in which points really mattered. So Colorado Stanford last week. So I assume many people, myself included, went to bed around the time that halftime was there and it was 29-0 Colorado. And I thought, all right, this is a game Colorado should win. Well, unfortunately for Coach Prime, he is in the big comeback Hall of Fame with Matt Ryan and with Steph Curry having blown that 3-1 lead against LeBron. And Colorado somehow lost that football game to Stanford. I think many people would say that Stanford is an inferior team to Colorado, but as we talked about with Arizona State, I wonder if the team makeup is, or the team's mentality is less about winning football games and more about the other stuff, the hype. And I think Coach Prime, in my opinion, is not getting enough credit for the things that he is saying when they're losing football games. Many people are still trying to take victory laps because of the media hype that went on. And I think that right now he is saying the right things when he says, we need to figure out what we're doing. The execution is not here. Do you want to be here? Do you want to play? And I think that it's a bad loss for them, but it could be one of those seminal moments that they use to grow, especially with these recruits coming in the following years. What do you think?
Yeah, this is going to be an exercise in character building for Colorado. And you're right. Coach Prime is saying all the right things. And I'm at the point where I truly believe, and I'm just going to say this, if I get if
Good.
you don't like the swag and the flashiness, that's fine. But if, and you could say that, but you cannot sit there and tell me, you cannot look at this and hear the things this man says and the way that he carries himself and at least not respect it. You know what I mean? Like, you don't have to agree with it. You could prefer things be done a different way, but I think you at least have to respect it. And the people out there that are still like banging the drum, that they're just haters, man, haters. Like, you have an ulterior motive. Like, there's, I just, you have an ulterior motive of some kind because if you cannot see the situation for what it is and look past all the window dressing to what's really going on, then I don't know what to tell you, I guess. Like I said, you have an ulterior motive and your mind will never change. They could win the national championship and your mind would never change. You're still going to hate um,
I
Coach
agree.
Prime and the way he conducts himself.
I agree. But you're right. This is a character building moment. And it was such a, I couldn't believe that they lost the football game, but they did. Also, a team that couldn't believe they lost a football game was West Virginia last week. Now, only reason I bring this up is because of the way that it ended. A good old fashioned, I think Houston's in the Big 12 now, right? So, a
Yeah.
good old fashioned Big 12 matchup. And Houston ended up winning the game, crushing the Mountaineers on a Hail Mary at the end of the game. So much so that Budge tweeted, I think it was like Mountaineer Magic, and then immediately was like, never mind. That's how quickly it happened.
Yeah. Gosh, I mean,
It was crazy. Like, I was like, no way. Pat McAfee was just beside himself. Beside himself.
and it's one of those plays, man. It's a very low percentage play. I mean, how often do we see a Hail Mary completed? And have you ever seen a Hail Mary in your life where there wasn't at least 3 occurrences of
Oh,
passing interference?
it's all pass interference. But I did appreciate once, I think it was a referee saying, like, on plays like that, because of the nature of the play, that it's almost an unwritten rule and understood that it's not going to get called because that's just like it would get called every single time. And if that were the case, the offense who was down would just throw a Hail Mary every time, get pass interference every time, and that's it. And at least in my opinion, they were owning up to the fact that they officiate games differently in different situations, which is something that we have said all the time happens in a lot of these different sports. And I get the rationale as to why they don't call it in that space because if they do, it would happen every time.
It's almost like in basketball. I feel like you see it if a team's trailing by a point or two, they inbound the ball on their own baseline of the defensive end, whatever, and they come down the court as time's expiring and someone drives to the basket for a layup. There's almost always a foul, and it
Yeah.
never ever no ref in the country has the stones to make that call in that moment.
Yeah, I mean, because you don't want to be the referee, the officials should never want to be mentioned at the end of a game, right? They should be seen but not heard or whatever you want to whatever phrase you want to use there because if you're talking about the refs it means that they didn't do their job.
Right.
And we've been hearing a lot more about the refs this year. I can't fault them for saying that about that particular situation because again, it happens all the time. It's why I honestly believe that football as a whole should be going back and reassessing how we dole out penalty yardage for holding because holding happens on every play and you could call it on every play. And when it does get called, it feels like should it be 10 yards because of how frequently it happens? You know what I mean? Like you could go on every single play and be like hold, 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 hold. It's just the egregious ones get called or
Do
the
you
ones that happen right in front of the ref.
Alright, do you think they should make it like a face mask where, like, if there's a hold at the point of attack that actually, like, impacts the play, it's a 10-yard penalty, but if there's a hold, because sometimes they call a hold that's completely
Yeah,
inconsequential,
I agree.
and if that happens, then maybe it's only a 5-yard penalty or something, you know what I mean?
That's what
And
I think. Yeah.
I coached with a guy who it would crack me up, great guy, but he was just, by like, the rules are the rules guy, and he would just chew on officials all the time about it's like it'd be a penalty, a hold, or something that had nothing to do with um anything, with the outcome of the play at all, and he'd want it called, and he'd be pissed, if they didn't call it. And I'm like, I get it though. Like
Yeah.
if it's unless it's something that is like impacts player safety, if it doesn't impact the outcome of the play, then you just need to let it be. No, I would say that's my opinion. And when it comes to officiating, you talked about how poor the officiating has been this year. I'm assuming by saying the officials have been in the news a lot. They've been
Yes.
talked about a lot because it's been really bad. And it's not just bad in to football. I mean, it's been pretty piss poor across the board. And there's a couple things I think need to happen. One, I think they need to pay officials more money. Two, they need to hold them more accountable for their performance.
Fair.
And three, they need to hold the people who treat officials poorly more accountable. Because that's really where, I mean, you have fewer people going into officiating, specifically at the lower levels, high school, like entry level officiating, because they just get absolutely crucified by moron parents and coaches. And who wants to do that for $50 or something? Um, so I think you got to find a way to pay officials more money, even at the lower levels, and then, like I said, hold them accountable for their performance. Now, I think that's more so at the elite levels, college and pro, and then find a way to be able to hold these idiots more accountable that are you know badgering the officials.
So your dad hypothesizes that the booth officials have been bad this year, but I think for the most part the booth officials do a good job. But I'm using this comment to say something about the way that games are officiated. This is at the NFL level and in college. In my opinion, officials when there are plays that they know there's going to be an automatic review, and I'm talking about turnovers and scores. There's an automatic review after every single one of those. I can't tell you how frustrated I get when the referees blow the whistle on what looks like a fumble in real time. And then we go back and replay, and it's like, oh, that should have been called a fumble. And now the coach has to use in the NFL one of their precious challenges, which sucks because they shouldn't have to. Like these are the or let's take a score. What is the harm in something that is so bang bang that you can't tell in the moment in calling it a touchdown, reviewing it, and then saying, after further review, here's the right call? I don't think that it's an indictment on the referee because trying to officiate a football game is hard. It gets really hard work. It's why in baseball, trying to throw a guy out at second base, seeing if he's safe or out, sometimes it's like a hair of grass between whether he's safe or out. And if we can get the call right, get it right. It just frustrates me because they do it in college for targeting. They automatically call targeting, they go to review and decide whether it is or not. To me, that's the best and most efficient way to do it. But why don't the referees on the field? Why is the mandate not, hey, if you think it's a turnover, let it play out. We're going to review it anyway.
No, I don't disagree. And one thing I think that's interesting about replay is I feel like it's kind of shown how good the officials are most of the time. Because I don't know what the percentages are, but I feel like there's a good percentage of the time where it's whatever they called on the field is holds up,
Yeah.
and so I think that's really impressive, especially when you see some of those like toe drag catches and things like that. It's like, wow. I mean, where in like real time, I'd be like, oh, dude, no way that dude's in bounds. And then you see the replay, and it's like, holy shit. Um, and I do think they are coached up, which this is the opposite of what you're saying, but I do think they get coached up and educated on like how to officiate those types of plays. And I think they do a decent job of it most of the time. I feel like they're getting better at it about letting the play out or calling a play a certain way. But the only thing that pisses me off about that is that if there isn't definitive evidence, the call on the field stands. And it's like, and that's what sucks because it's like it just falls back to whatever, they called in real time.
Yeah.
And because there's been times where it's like where you could tell when you watched the replay, no matter what they would have called, it would have stood because there wasn't, you know, indisputable evidence either way. Those are frustrating once in a while, but I guess if we can't tell, how do you change it? I guess you're just
Yeah.
mad that they made the one call on the field and not the other.
Well, I guess in my opinion, when you have a finite number of challenges to be used, and you have to use one for something that could have been reviewed already,
Sure.
it's kind of one of those. And I get what you're saying, but I wonder if there are less of those that happen where it's like they make a call and they can't go back because it turns out we don't have indisputable evidence. But like I just feel like there has to be something better about these plays because teams lose either challenges because they only have a certain number of them, or they lose, um, they lose like the possibility of return a turnover because the whistle blows a play dead, and so you can't do anything after that.
Yeah.
That's all.
I do think it's silly that in the NFL, that you're limited on how many times you can challenge. I get they don't want people just challenging all day, but it's like if you lose a challenge or whatever, it's like, what do they get, two
Yes, they get
challenges?
two, and if they're
If you,
successful on both, they get a third.
and if you don't have a timeout, you
You
can't
don't.
challenge. Is
No.
that how it works?
Yeah, because you lose a timeout.
Right.
I feel like if you keep getting them right, you should just keep getting them.
Sure. And at the same time, though, it's like, man, like if I'm out of challenges and there's an absolutely egregious call that happens on the field, like the fact that I can't challenge it, it just seems kind of ridiculous. I don't know. I mean, I almost think that you should do away with the challenging, and there should just be a group of people or a person who, the replay official that's actively watching the game that just prompts, like college, I guess, where they're just prompting the replays uh remotely or whatever whenever they feel like there was a call that needs reviewed.
Yeah. So a lot of things happened in week 7, but we're gonna move forward here. But one of the things that did happen that we're not going to get into, but we are going to show here, a lot of the top 25 at the bottom, there was a lot of upsets in week 7. Washington State, Kansas, Kentucky, all in the top 20 or the bottom of the top 25 got upset. And so there's been a lot of movement there. But one of the other things that's happened is a lot of the cream has risen to the top. Most of the teams that are at the top have continued to stay at the top. And Georgia's still the top dog. I don't know how that's going to go because Brock Bowers is hurt. He seems like he's going to be out for, I think, 4 weeks or so. And the games are only going to get tougher for them. What's going to happen in Michigan if they stop getting the signs? Ohio State, Penn State is coming up. So we're going to have one of those teams out of the top 10, obviously. Washington, such a big win against Oregon. Can they keep it up? So that's the current state of the top 25. Not much surprises me, although I'm just blown away that Iowa's still there because I cannot believe they won a game 15-6. Just horrifying.
Yeah, it seems kind of wild that anyone from the Big Ten West is ranked right now. I guess they're the biggest turd in the toilet bowl, I guess.
Yes. Also, shout out to the Air Force, number 22. Love seeing a service academy in the top 25. It doesn't happen all that often, but it seems like it happens more often for Air Force. Maybe not. I don't know. But it's always nice to see a service academy up there. That game
Agreed.
against Wyoming was wild, absolutely wild, because I watched the last 10 minutes of it. Air Force coughing the ball up. Wyoming can't get anything done offensively, misses a field goal, so many things. By the way, Wyoming has some of the ugliest uniforms in all of college football outside of Oregon.
Oh, the yellow and brown.
Brown and
Not a
yellow.
fan.
I'm not a fan either, but it's old school, so you gotta
I
give it the
feel like
nod
they
in
they
that.
could probably, if they got a little more creative, they could probably do some fun things with that color scheme. I mean, I get it. You're limited, I suppose, but um, I don't know. I don't want to write them off because I think that
No,
some creativity can make about any uniform look pretty good.
it's the colonial script that does it. It just makes it look really, really bad, but that's it. So, we're gonna move on because guess what, man? Both of our teams are off this week.
Yeah, I don't even know if we got to talk about it. We could just blow by it if you want
We are
to.
blowing right by it because Virginia Tech got a big win against Wake Forest somehow and are sitting at 3-4. But Notre Dame finally gets a week off after all of these games in a row. So let's move on to week 8. We're actually going to start where Rick is starting here, which is Air Force, because Air Force is playing Navy, and that is happening right up the road over here. If you want to know who Coach and I picked during crunch time, you can check that out on the YouTube page right now. That was one of the games. But Air Force comes in ranked number 22. It's always exciting. Now, Air Force, we have kind of a beef with because last year we were hoping that they were going to go undefeated. They looked really good last year and make it to the college football playoff, and they lost to Wyoming. This year, they got the job done. So now they're playing Navy. Now, you said during crunch time that the records are thrown out the window when the service academies play each other. And I think that that is 100% true. On paper, Air Force should be the better team and is the better team because Navy's kind of struggled a little bit, but it's on Navy's home turf. This is a reputation battle 100%. It doesn't matter what the other team's record is. Navy's going to come out and play their best football from 1928 and try to suffocate Air Force. But I think Air Force is a little bit too talented.
Yeah, I think that Navy's only chance is to control the clock, try to shorten the game, muck it up a little bit, and limit possessions, and try to make it a low scoring affair. If they're successful in doing that, it could be interesting. We'll see. But you're right. Air Force is definitely the more talented team. They've been more impressive this season. You're going to get Navy's best shot because, again, it is the two service academies for sure. But I just have a hard time picking against Air Force in this game.
I agree. By the way, I really wish I understand that Army Navy is the oldest rivalry of the service academies, but I wish the other ones got a little bit more shine.
I
I
agree.
really do wish that it would be awesome actually if at the end of the season the two best records of the service academies played for the Commander in Chief's trophy, like they actually had a bowl game for them for the Commander in Chief's trophy, because we never get to see a presentation of that. And if Air Force wins, we never hear about it because the Army Navy game is the last regular season game during championship weekend. So we never get to see if Air Force wins it. It's just strange how it should be given more shine is what I'm advocating for.
I don't disagree at all, man. Like it should be a bigger deal for
Yeah,
sure. How you structure it, I'm not sure. I get, the Army Navy thing goes back a
of
100
course.
years, but um no, I think it's wonderful. And this idea popped in my head when you're talking about this, about like giving these, like, in this case, like Air Force is going to hopefully be somewhere in the middle of the top 25
I hope.
by the end of the year. And I'm like, gosh, how do you give that like second tier of teams past the playoff like some shine? And I've never been a fan of the bowl system
No.
as it exists at all. Um, what if college football, did something like their own version of the NIT, like exists in basketball, right?
Yeah.
A second tier playoff of some kind. Uh, I'd watch it. I mean, who wouldn't want to see, like some of those teams, Air Force, for example, to have a shot to win a couple postseason games of some kind.
Or what if they did something where they have all the military academies like VMI, the Citadel, and Air Force, Navy, Army, like they all find those and they have like a tournament almost. Something like that where
Yeah,
they all kind
that'd
of
be
play
cool
each
too.
other. Yeah, it would be great. I think it would be awesome. I think a lot of people with military connections would love it. So let's make it happen. This is an idea we're coining here. Trademark, patent pending, all that good stuff. So rolling through some of these other games that are not of ranked, but I think are of note. This one's going to be a lot of fun, I think. Oklahoma State, West Virginia. West Virginia seems to be incapable of playing a boring game this season. And Oklahoma State's always one of those teams. Obviously, their coach is a man, he's 50. And West Virginia, coming off this loss, I'm curious because this feels like it could be one of those like 59-49 games.
Yeah, it could be. I think it's going to be a fun game to watch.
So I put
Oklahoma
it out
State's
here.
they're coming off a couple of big wins, man. Right? Kansas and Kansas State; those are two quality football teams.
Yep.
But they won both those games at home, right? Both of those games were preceded by a loss against Iowa State in Ames, right? No disrespect to Ames. Okay, I lie.
Lots of disrespect.
Disrespect to Ames, Iowa, especially as a Hawkeye wrestling fan. A lot of disrespect to Ames, Iowa. Ames, Iowa is not Morgantown, West Virginia, man. Like that place is a fun place. Well, you would disagree, but it's a fun place for a college football game. It's a great atmosphere. It's the first time Oklahoma State's going on the road in a few weeks. Again, man, I just like the whole coming off a loss thing. I just think it refocuses teams. I think you might have again Oklahoma State flying a little high. You've got West Virginia coming off their butt whooping from Houston, and I like the Mountaineers.
Yeah, I do too. I think the Mountaineers coming back home, they're wounded after that loss to Houston, and Oklahoma State maybe riding a little bit high, but that could be one to put on your radar if at some point in the middle of the afternoon, because I think that's an afternoon game, and you're like, I don't have anything to watch. Well, throw that game on. Another one that could be intriguing of two teams that were in the mix in the top 25, but no longer are, but could still be in the mix for the ACC title, Clemson and Miami. So this one's interesting because both these teams coming in 4-2. Dabo, once again, having a disappointing season by many people's metrics, and Miami coming off 2 straight losses after that horrific loss to Georgia Tech and a game that they probably should have lost to Drake May and North Carolina. Both of these teams need this game. Who needs it more, though, is my question.
Oh man, that's tough. Probably Clemson, really. I think to stay in the hunt, the ACC for sure. I think Clemson needs it. I mean, Miami is still they can still kind of write this off as a step 2 in the rebuilding process. I think they have the ability to do that. Clemson is they're trying to cling to their throne, right, as at the top of the ACC, and it's one thing to fall to second or even third, but you lose to Miami, man, you start slipping down the ladder pretty far.
Yes, but my question is for both of these squads. So let's say Clemson loses. Now that's 3 losses, I think, 2 years in a row. Does it get to the point where Dabo's job starts to become in question? And on the other side, if Miami loses, that's 3 in a row. I think you could take 2 in a row if they hadn't had the loss to Georgia Tech. But now we're looking at Cristobal. This is year 2. I get it, but the U doesn't have time for this because the reason why I say that is they got Cristobal in here to be like the cleaner, the finisher, the closer of all this because they messed around with the other guys. And now they got a big boy in here. And losing this game, I think, is not what they want. And I wonder if people in Miami, Coral Gables, are going to be calling for Mario Cristobal's head after this because I think we said it earlier that the kneel down stuff is going to follow him for a while. And if they lose 3 in a row after that, I think that's really, really bad. So I almost kind of feel like both these teams need it so bad that there really isn't a clear winner. Neither of
Yeah,
these teams can afford to lose.
it's going to be really detrimental to whoever loses this game, for sure. And like my dad said, and he's right. I mean, I agree. As a Notre Dame fan, you want Clemson to win because it
Yeah.
improves their strength of schedule and everything else. And then for the same reason that I'd like to see Duke beat Florida State this week. And it's really it's hard. I'm capable of looking at things objectively, but it's hard to not look through that lens at the same time when
Of
looking at some of
course.
these matchups.
Of course. So now to the big boys. So Utah travels to the Coliseum to face USC, who's coming off that loss to Notre Dame. I don't know if Cam Rising is going to play in this game or not, but whether he plays or not, they seem to have a lot of talent. Their only loss is to Oregon State. I know you're very much on the train that USC is going to come in wounded, and you like them coming off of a loss. Utah's a 7-point dog, even though they're the higher ranked team going in. I think it's going to be close. I do really like the Utes because I just think that USC's defense, like Lincoln Riley, to a man, if you and I had a drink with him when we asked him, do you care about defense? I think if he was drunk, he would laugh and say, "Absolutely not."
No, I agree. There's a high school football team here locally. It's actually Peoria High School. Um, they score 70 points every week and they give up 40 plus. They don't give a shit about playing defense, man. Their whole deal is we're just going to outscore you. And that's it. They're not worried about it at all. And I mean, they've had success with it. They've won a state championship. So you can't really knock it too much. I
Nope.
know it makes a lot of the old people upset because they wanted to see good defensive football. But no, I agree with you. I agree with you though. I don't think Lincoln Riley would care, man. I think he'd be like, "Hey, we just need to score more." Period. And
Fair.
um,
Do you think people are giving Utah more of a chance if Cam Rising is playing in this game healthy?
I think that would definitely boost their chances. I think that there's people that after what they've seen from USC the last few weeks, I think there's people that don't that like Utah regardless.
Yeah,
Um,
like me.
yeah, and
But
that's fair because I mean,
USC's also struggled with Utah though. Like
oh,
they
for
lost to him last
sure,
year, so
and
that's
but
why.
also, that could be a factor, right? I mean, you're talking about now these are all intangible things, right? But
Sure.
USC coming off a loss, coming off an ugly loss at Notre Dame and the way they played. And now you got Utah who beat you twice last year. And there's just there's a lot of reasons to be focused and motivated for this football game, which is why I tend to think they will be and I think I favor USC in this game a little bit, and that's not even in the Notre Dame factor of strength of schedule, whatever. I just genuinely think that um, if this program wants to be on the trajectory that they need to
Claim.
be
Yeah.
on, this is a game they have to win.
Yep. Speaking of programs on a trajectory, Florida State hosting Duke. Now Duke is not going to have Riley Leonard. I would think not. If he does play, I can't imagine he's going to be 100% after that ankle injury. Florida State has looked really good against everybody except for Boston College somehow. I think that one was for Budge though. That's the only reason why I think that they did that. But Florida State, I know you said Duke played well against NC State last week, and they did without Riley Leonard. But this is a new ball game. Going on the road, Tallahassee's a tough place. They got Jordan Travis playing extremely well. That team is very talented down there, and I think may be a true national title contender. This feels like one of those games where Duke may be in it in the first half, and then Florida State just overwhelms them in the second half because they have a better quarterback.
So I have an interesting take on this game,
Okay.
Mike. This game is going to directly impact Mike Elko's job.
Oh,
And what I mean by that is if they win this game, and this still may be the case, but definitely 100%, if they win this game, Mike Elko will not be the coach at Duke next year.
you think that quickly?
I think so. I think a win like this with the body of work they've put together throughout the season so far, and how quickly he's really gotten things moving in the right direction there. And if he shows that you can go on the road, beat a top 5 opponent in Florida State that's got great wins on their season, on their schedule so far. I just think that if anyone is kind of kicking the tires on Mike Elko, I think this makes you go all in.
So let me ask you this. Mike Elko takes the Northwestern job. Is
He
that an
wouldn't.
upgrade?
Oh man,
See?
it's
Big
in
Ten.
reality, it's a lateral move. You're trading one academic institution for another that
You are.
two schools that aren't known for their football program but have had good years in the past. It's ugh.
But a lot of people are
I
high
mean,
on that
there's
job because it's in the Big Ten and because you're going to have USC, Oregon, Washington,
sure, man, but like
Texas, more moving
there's
over
a
there, not
lot of
Texas.
undesirable things about Northwestern. I mean, one, yes, it's in the Big Ten. They're on the north side of Chicago in a
Yep.
beautiful area in Evanston, but they play in a glorified high school football
I
stadium.
know, it's
Like
terrible.
their actual game facility is garbage. I've been there; it is trash. Now they did build a new practice facility out on the lake, which is beautiful.
Didn't you meet
But
Pat Fitzgerald there too?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh,
Never meet your heroes.
Yeah, I did not get,
The vibe.
I did
Yeah,
not get
haze.
struck by
Yeah.
any flaccid penises while I was there. Marked safe.
No, I hear what you're saying. Mike Elko, Yeah, I mean, does he move to the SEC? Maybe not that quite kind of a jump, but
Texas A&M,
I don't know. Okay, so this is we have
Michigan
gone on.
State, Michigan State.
Michigan State is probably a better candidate than Texas A&M because I believe, yep, I believe that Texas A&M would not take a guy coming from Duke because there's no way, in my opinion. I think that they have higher standards for
But he was the
themselves.
defensive coordinator there. He
I get
left
it.
there to take the job,
I
so
get it. But Texas A&M is one of the most delusional
sure.
universities in terms of football. And I think your theory, even though you threw it out there kind of haphazardly, they're giving Urban Meyer a call.
Yeah, oh, for sure. Texas A&M, yeah,
100%.
absolutely.
100% they're giving Urban Meyer a call. And God damn it, if he's on that sideline, I will hate Texas A&M so much
He's like a
more.
mercenary, man. Like this is what he is. Like, uh, he if he takes that job, or if like somehow he takes the Michigan State job, like that man. Not that I think he does now, but I think that solidifies the fact that dude has no allegiance to anyone
Don't
besides
even care.
himself.
He doesn't. He doesn't already. We don't even need to hypothesize that. Moving right along. Okay, so 2 more games to go. Tennessee and Alabama. So Tennessee traveling to Tuscaloosa. This is like a 10-point spread, I think, now. And Nick Saban, left for dead, carcass on the side of the road, just continues to get the job done. Has it been flashy? No. Has it been traditional, I guess, Alabama football? Not necessarily, but they're getting the job done and they're still out there and they're still dangerous. So here come the Vols, who looked terrible against Florida, who sucks, I think. And now they're coming into this game in the SEC, which is a game they have to win. These are the tough games that come up. And I know you and I are both high on Tennessee keeping it closer, but Alabama is still the better team here, right?
Oh man,
So you're
I
not high on
think
Alabama. You
so.
you don't think that they're that talented, right?
No, I don't. I honestly, this season may prove to be one of the best coaching jobs that Nick Saban's ever done. I think because I do
It's
think that
fair.
they are lacking in the talent department compared to Alabama teams of the past, and they got off to a rough start. And credit to them. And Nick Saban at one point in time, after what he was seeing, he took the reins and said, "All right, this is what we're going to do. We're going to do things this way." And they pivoted in how they operated, and it has changed their trajectory, I think, significantly. I mean, this does look like Alabama from 10 years ago a
Yeah, it
little bit, I
does.
think.
It does.
Great defense, ball control on the offensive side of the ball. Now, what's different is even though Jaden Milrow is not great,
He's been getting better.
he has big play
Yes.
capability, which you
High
didn't have.
upside.
Yeah, which you didn't have out of some of those guys back in the day. They were just turning around handing the ball off.
McElroy.
Yeah,
Is it?
you know,
Yeah.
like turn around, give it to Mark Ingram,
Who
whoever.
was the other guy? He played in
Um,
the XFL.
mm,
Yeah, I'm talking about Brent Musburger was drooling all over his girlfriend at during the national championship game.
gosh,
Can't
I
think of his
know the
name right now.
situation. I can't think of it either,
Yeah, I
but
can't think of it. But
um,
another white guy.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
Another
Mac Jones.
under talented white guy. Yes.
Yeah.
So you know they do have some playmaking ability to that position, but they've taken the pressure off of them though, and where it's like, hey, you don't have to go win us the game. Don't make any mistakes, and then you know you're going to have some chances to make some big plays, and when you do, let's capitalize on it. And at the same time, we're going to play great defense, and that's what they're doing. So, I I'm I'm not high on them from a perspective of that. I think they're extremely talented, but at the same time, I'm impressed with the way that they have adjusted and the way they're playing right now. You can't deny it. I think this game is going to be,
Wins or wins.
yeah, that's all that matters at the end of the day, especially in the SEC. Just win, man. Like, no one cares about margin of victory or anything like that when you play the schedule, an SEC schedule, especially. So, I don't know. I mean, Tennessee, you know, Alabama went to Knoxville last year, got beat by Tennessee, and then you know we witnessed one of the best celebrations I've ever seen in sports.
Yep.
Um, so you know, there's a little bit there, some bulletin board material. I have not been impressed by Tennessee really either because they are not last year's Tennessee
No.
for sure. So
They're
I
putting
think
some
it's
things together,
I
though.
think it's just gonna be a deal where Alabama just finds a way to win
Yeah, but it's gonna be
somehow.
close, I think. I think
Yeah, I
it could
agree.
be close. If it was in reverse, I might feel like Tennessee has a chance, but it's hard because Saban is a better coach. Josh Heupel is the guy responsible for that timeout thing at the end of the Florida game, and Nick Saban's not going to do something like that. So I think that'll be a good one. It'll be kind of like an old-fashioned SEC game. I think lower scoring, probably gritty, gutted out kind of a game, kind of like Alabama and Arkansas this past weekend. Although Arkansas was down big and then had to come back, but either way. So the last game that we're highlighting here, Penn State, Ohio State. This is for one half of Big Ten supremacy. So this is kind of an eliminator in the Big Ten tournament. The way I see it is like a three-way race for the Big Ten championship, and I think that this is an eliminator. Whoever loses this game, probably out of the Big Ten championship, although I guess it depends on what happens in Ohio State, Michigan. But Penn State traveling to Ohio State, I think, is the key for me. I think that James Franklin has a very talented squad. I love James Franklin as a coach. I think that he's an excellent coach. He has a lot of talent, but if it were in Happy Valley, I feel a little bit more convinced that Penn State had a chance, but I just think Ohio State's defense is really, really good. And if they can keep Penn State off the board, which Illinois was able to do for quite a while, then I think that their offense has been getting better. And I think that they could put up a little bit more, put up more points than Penn State can and take this game and go into their game with Michigan undefeated. But it could, I mean, anything could happen, but that's just the way I see it.
Yeah, I think Northwestern even kind of
Yeah.
held Penn State down for a little while. So I think, what a lot of people are sort of projecting is that you're going to see out of this little Big Ten love triangle that the home teams are going to hold serve, right? So it's one of these things where, like, if Penn State can find a way to win, like that's like a +1 in their category, like even beyond the win, like the fact that, because then they're going to get Michigan at home. So which you got to feel good about, even with as good as Michigan is. Like,
Yep.
you get Ohio State on the road, you get that one, you feel really good going into Michigan at home, especially with the environment that they put on there in Happy Valley. Um, that being said, I agree with you. Ohio State has a very good defense, and I think that they're gonna be able to score more points, which is the name of the game. So as much as I don't like Ryan Day, and this isn't even a Notre Dame schedule thing, I
I
just
don't like him either.
I think that I feel like Ohio State finds a way to win.
Yeah, I think that's correct. And I think it's better for us as the consumer and the viewer if Michigan and Ohio State go in undefeated into that game because it'd be great and there'll
Now,
be a lot of stakes.
personally, I would love watching Penn State go in there and just beat the brakes off of them. I would really
Oh,
enjoy that.
let me be clear. If that's what happens, nothing. You will hear no complaints from me whatsoever. None whatsoever. I'm not even really a Big 10 guy as a whole. Like I find most of their fan bases, like the ones that are the loudest, to be kind of obnoxious. But that's just me. But if Penn State goes in there and wins 49-14, happy man. I might even crack open my first beer in a few months if that happens, but I probably won't. Man, we have come up to the end. This is the longest college kickoff eve we've ever had. We even outlasted Jonah this time. So
Yeah, we did.
we have done this, but we had a lot to catch up on because we didn't get anything done last week. And honestly, it's been a good time just talking some football, man. And it's always good to have some banter. Jonah had some great questions, and I think we went off on some tangents that were awesome. So I was very pleased with being able to talk some philosophy and not just what's going on in these games. And please bring that energy next time for everybody who's still in the feed, of course. If you want a school to be highlighted, you want us to take notice of a school that you're rooting for, do not forget to give us and shout out those in the comments section, of course. But Brad, before we get out of here, have any parting thoughts for what looks like two people watching the feed right now?
Well, I don't know. It looks like my dad. Dad, you take the wrong meds tonight? Maybe one too
Nice.
many of something in the pill box there. Got you a little backwards. Okay, there it is. You make, yeah.
Yeah.
Friday's worth looking forward to. No, that's awesome. No,
No,
we,
no.
we
Put
look
the other one
forward to
back
it.
up. That's way
We look
better.
we look for,
Yes.
we look forward to it as well for the same reason. It's just enjoyable, and it's a lot of fun. I think when there are opportunities to spin off on some of these little weird tangents and stories and stuff like that, and it's fun because as the season has progressed, there becomes more opportunity to do that because there are more storylines to kind of focus on or to highlight in different situations. So,
Hmm.
now that being said, man, the Irish are off for the first time this season, so that will change my approach to college football Saturday. But there's some really good games going on tomorrow, and I'm looking
Absolutely.
forward to taking them in on the brand new 75-inch that I just
Hello.
hung up in the living room.
That is excellent.
So I'm gonna enjoy that tomorrow, and it's like right now we've got like the beautiful, perfect fall weather happening here in Central Illinois.
Yeah,
So
man.
windows open, little cool breeze coming through, and enjoying the best sport there is.
I totally agree. I hope everybody enjoys their college football Saturday. But before we get out, a few things: TikTok at INC Sports, Twitter at Iceman and Coach, Facebook INC Sports, Twitch INC Sports. We've had one person watching that feed the whole time. Of course, we are on YouTube. We just broke the 300 subscriber barrier. So congrats to us. Yeah. 301. We were stuck at 298 for like 4 weeks, it felt like, but we finally got over the hump there. So
We got to
if
find out
you
who the Twitcher is.
yeah,
Identify
we do. I
yourself.
know. They never make any comments. And it's not like, I don't know if maybe they just assume that because you're on the channel, like we run a feed that they count us as that person. Like it's not open on any of these devices. So if you're
No.
watching on Twitch, please let us know who you are because that's fantastic. Of course, we are audio, Apple, Spotify, all the other podcast apps. If you want to listen to all the other things we have going on, we just released some content yesterday on the YouTube channel. I'm releasing the talk that I had about the baseball playoffs with Jonesy a little bit later tomorrow because that was a gigantic file and took 3 hours to upload to YouTube. So that's why that took a little bit longer. Matty S Media Network, mattysmedia.com. And of course, scrolling across the bottom of the screen, if you have a take or you want to just tell us how awesome we are, call or text the show 703-718-6314. Coach, it's been awesome. All the people that watch, it's been awesome. We thank you. Hope everybody is well. I hope you are all safe and enjoy your college football Saturday. This is College Kickoff Eve.